Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond. Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, the latest from the oil and gas sector. What are the new developments and how are they likely to affect the industry? Recently, government tabled before Parliament 2 bills that will cater for the next crucial stages in the oil and gas sector. The Petroleum Refining, Gas Processing and Conversion, Transportation and Storage Bill 2012 and the Petroleum Exploration, Development and Production Bill 2012 are now before Parliament for scrutiny before they are later enacted. The bills came at a time when many experts were warning about the potential danger of this country facing problems if the legal regime is not well regulated. These experts say that Uganda must first enact laws that meet internationally acceptable practices and norms. Important too are recent developments in the sector that include the signing of new oil agreements, the farming down by tallow oil, and reports that the construction of a refinery is about to begin. In Parliament, these developments have been questioned, given the fact that Parliament had put a moratorium on all transactions until all the relevant laws are enacted. The desire for information about the Ugandan oil and gas sector remains high, and many people continue to ask when the first barrel of oil will actually be produced, following reports that the production phase is about to kick off. Concerns about the state of the environment in the Alberton region remains a big topic, while members of the public are also wondering how government is selecting candidates for training to handle the sector. So tonight we continue to analyze the key developments within the Ugandan oil sector to try and establish if all is well and if at all the fears of the public are well catered for under legislation and general access to information. Our guests tonight, well, people who would know. Mr. Alex Nyombi, Geophysicist at the Petroleum Exploration and Production Department from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. You're most welcome, Mr. Nyombi.
Thank you, Edmond.
We're also joined by Mr. Henry Bazira, Executive Director of the Water Governance Institute. He's also a member of the Civil Society Coalition on the Oil and Gas Sector. You're most welcome, Mr. Bazira.
Good evening, listeners, viewers.
We're also joined by Ms. Gloria Sebikari, Communications Officer at the Petroleum and Exploration and Production Department, long titles. Department, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. You're most welcome, Gloria.
Thank you, Edmond. Good evening, listeners and viewers.
Let's talk about these bills, Alex. They were tabled in Parliament at a time when your ministry was coming under fire from Parliament that you're being too slow. Are we not too late already with these laws?
The laws, we are not too late at all. It was in the policy of 2008, the National Oil and Gas Policy, that recognized the need to put in place new legislation to take the sector forward. Because the challenges that existed before discovery are quite different from the challenges that exist right now. And also we should remember that the oil industry is very dynamic. The oil industry of 1985 is different from the oil industry of today. A lot of things happen in the industry, like price fluctuations, which change policy, and the changes take place worldwide. So that's why the National Oil and Gas Policy of 2008 recognized that we need to put in place new legislation. Now, immediately after the policy came out, government started on the efforts to put up the new legislation, and the efforts have been going on. The first draft came out in 2009, and then consultations went on. The first draft of the Petroleum Exploration, Development and Production Bill. So consultations went on within the country, the different stakeholders, civil society, government institutions, and non-government organizations, and then abroad, other people who know the sector. So the process has been ongoing, and we think that this is the time that it needed, because we needed to come up with a document which is solid and that can take the sector forward without needing to change 1 or 2 years down the road.
But you waited until pressure had been exerted. Why did you wait until someone twists your arm to prepare these laws?
Well, Precisely speaking, that's not the case, because by the time that debate took place in Parliament, which came up with the resolution of tabling the bills, the Natural Resources Committee had already been informed by the Ministry of Energy and Development that the bill would be tabled towards the end of last year. So there was a work plan and there was a timeline, and the Ministry was following these timelines.
You are following the timeline?
Yes.
So they just coincided with the arguments in Parliament?
Yes. So Parliament was already aware, it's on record, that these bills would be tabled within that timeline.
Gloria, tell us a little bit about what's in these bills, the two bills.
Thank you, Edmond. As you mentioned earlier, there are two separate bills that have been tabled before Parliament. One is the Petroleum Exploration, Development and Production Bill 2012 that mainly looks at the resource side of the sector. It looks at how licensing will be undertaken. It brings about some environmental concerns, and then something else that wasn't in the previous bills that is now in the new law.
Yes.
The new bill aspects to do with local content and promoting national participation in the oil and gas sector. As Alex said, a lot of changes have happened in the environment movement, in the way the technology that has been developed to take forward the sector. So all these considerations have been put into the new bill. Then the second bill, as you said, is to do with value addition. It deals with transportation, refining, gas processing, and conversion. So those are aspects that were not fully captured in the 1985 Act.
All right. We'll talk about the second bill later, which is about transportation and so on, specifically with regard to the environment. First of all, though, let's talk about local participation. What does that bill specifically say about local participation?
Thank you, Edmond. Regarding national participation, the specifics on what the bill says are freely accessible to the public. First of all, the bill is on our website. The draft bill is on our website.
The draft bill?
Yeah, it's on our website. So it looks at what measures should be in place by the oil companies to ensure that, first of all, Ugandans are employed in the sector.
Yes.
And then second, it also provides for training of Ugandans, so that in fields whereby there are no trained, qualified Ugandans, because it's a highly technical field.
It is, yes.
There are certain aspects that are currently not being taken on by Ugandans. So it looks at provisions like the companies having a training plan in place to look at how succession can be brought about, so that we have Ugandans also progressing in terms of their skills for the oil and gas sector.
Mr. Henry Bazira, are these the kind of things that would make you happy?
Well, Edmond, just to say that we have had an opportunity to review the bills, the two bills. We had about the 3 days retreat last week as the Civil Society Coalition on Oil and Gas, and we were able to come out some preliminary comments about the bill. Comparing the draft bills that are now before Parliament with the last ones that had been prepared in 2011, I think there's been great improvement in the drafts that have been presented to Parliament. However, there's still a lot of lacuna or gaps that we think need to be addressed. If I can just focus on what Gloria has been talking about, local content. Local content is very important, especially if government deliberately helps the Ugandan citizens, Ugandan investors to develop, to go into the industry. For example, we have a youth development fund. I think we also need a fund deliberately for private sector to go and enter those areas of the industry. For example, you have production of oil. There are other products that come out of oil. whose industries may not be around already. And those are areas where our local citizens, private sector can actually go in. For example, processing of Vaseline, oils, getting out bitumen, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, paints. Those are areas that we need to see how Ugandans can enter. We should not have the mindset that investors are only those people that come from outside.
Right.
Yeah.
We can have internal investors.
Yes.
So the Uganda can take care of the ancillary services, the ancillary products that come on the side.
Yeah.
The oil itself might be a bit too heavy for some of them.
Well, the investment involved at the upstream end is just too heavy.
And almost
Actually,
prohibitive.
even some of the processing units are equally expensive to put in place.
Yes.
So, for example, if you're having a paint factory, you actually need some
To transfer, to interpret the oil from the current,
to produce oil paints.
to
Produce, yeah, even pharmaceuticals.
You need a lot of technology.
Yeah,
there.
you need a technology, you need a huge industry. So government must set aside money to help Ugandan investors that have good plans to invest, just like they have gone to help youth develop themselves. Let government set aside money to help our indigenous investors to go into the sector. That is how, for me, local content will have a meaning to this country.
They've done it before. One local entrepreneur, Bazira, got help in that area. So I believe government can do it, can expand it. Alex, talk to us about these oil agreements that were signed. The Parliament had put a moratorium on new agreements being signed. Government went ahead and controversially signed an agreement with Tullow, allowing it to farm down its shares to Chinese company Sinuk and Total. Why did you do that thing?
Thank you, Edmond. But maybe before I go to that, I'd like also to put one or two things on the local content in the new bill, the upstream bill. What the bill says, it gives a framework. It gives, like Gloria said, it gives a framework for local content. For example, it requires that local suppliers of goods and services will be given precedence where they match the quality, the required quality. So other things like price can come in later, but then the bill also puts a framework like, can there be an allowance on the pricing? For example, if an international firm is supplying at a lower price than a local firm, should we have some allowance to allow the local firm? Because you know, as you build local content, at the beginning it's expensive, because you need, sometimes the local supplier can give you at a slightly higher.
Could make some losses because of the quotations.
And then also the timelines for delivery. So the bill puts that into account.
But that will make the local suppliers agents of the foreigners in the end, won't it? They still had been adding very little value.
Not necessarily, because also now the details will come, of course, in the regulations, the attendant regulations that will come after the bill has been passed. But you see what government intends to put in place is that you, a local supplier, if you are subsidized or if you are given a chance to supply at slightly higher price, you should show improvement. Otherwise, instead of adding value, we will be consuming wealth, because you cannot subsidize someone for 5 years, 6 years, and there is no improvement. So in the industry, you need to see someone improving, the local supply industry improving and showing gains. So that's why government intends to take the local content forward. But the details will come into the regulations.
So there's going to be affirmative action in favor of the locals. I don't like that word too much. In favor of the nationals.
There will be a framework.
For a certain
there will be a framework to give nationals priority. Well, to go back to the question you asked about the transactions. On February 3rd, government completed 2 PSAs with Tullow, Uganda Limited. The one PSA was for Exploration Area 1. The second one was for the Kanyataba Prospect Area.
Which was given free, a bonus?
No, not necessarily.
Bakshish, like the Indians would say.
This is what I'm going to talk about. There was a license issued for Exploration Area 1 in 2004, July, and then another one issued for Exploration Area 3A, 2004, September. So these licenses were issued to Heritage with Energy Africa, 50-50 basis. So Heritage and Energy Africa had 50-50 in those two licenses.
Equal shareholding.
Yes, so Area 1 and 3A. Now later, Talo took over Energy Africa, so Energy Africa became Talo Uganda Limited. Now, which means that the license now became 50-50 between Talo and Heritage. Now, in 2009, Heritage wanted to farm out industrial language. They wanted to sell off their interests in Uganda to another company. So they sold out their interests to Talo, but that would mean that Talo now, because Talo was already in exploration area 2, it would mean that Talo has 100% in area 1, area 2, and area 3A. That would be a monopoly situation.
Yes.
As a country, you don't need that.
Right.
So another issue was that when Heritage was selling, the money it invested and the money it got it was going to get from the transaction, there was a gain on their capital.
Yes.
And according to Ugandan law, the Income Tax Act, you are supposed to pay
30% tax.
Yes, taxes on that gain.
Corporation tax.
So what happened is that Heritage did not agree at first. They contested the tax, and then, as you know, they were moving
Let's first talk about the farm down. Let's forget about the tax for now, because that's a whole debate on its own. Let's talk about the farm down. The aim was to remove a monopoly, so they had to ask Talo to sell it, because it owned 100% after buying from Heritage.
This is how the story builds.
Yes.
Now, within that time, since government did not want a monopoly basis, Talo came to government and said, well, I will not be a monopoly because I'm bringing in new partners. So Talo was in a data room. They got 2 partners, Total and Sinok. By that time, when Heritage was moving out, the 2 licenses I've talked about were still valid. So what happened? Talo negotiated with the partners on the basis that the 2 licenses were valid. Yes. And those were the assets that were envisaged Talo would have at the end of the negotiations. Now, the negotiations for taxes went on too long until March 2011. That's when they were settled and the taxes were paid to government. Remember, Heritage had moved out, but government hadn't given consent, because the law requires that when a company is farming out their interests, or when they are changing operatorship or interests in a license, government must consent to that.
Right.
So government did not give clear consent or total consent before the taxes were paid. So we had a period of more than a year in negotiations where Heritage had already stepped out and Talo could not be allowed to come in because the transaction hadn't been completed.
Yes.
So there was no operator in those areas, and the time on the licenses were ticking. And remember, Talo had negotiated with the partners on the basis that those licenses were valid.
Yes.
So when finally that impasse was solved in March 2011, the licensee said, okay, you have received, government received their taxes, our taxes,
yes,
totally. So now the negotiation was, or the concern was, that since you have received my taxes, how about the time I lost?
Right.
It was, and also, now the license for Area 3A had expired.
Yes.
And the license, by March 2011.
Right.
And the license for Area 1 had only 3 months left. So also the new partners now said to Talo, well, we negotiated, but the terms were different. You have nearly nothing now. How can we come in when you have nothing?
Right.
We cannot pay you all this money when you have nothing. So Talo said to government, well, my partners want these assets, and because that's how we negotiated, and you can understand that the impasse was there, but now you have got your side cleared. How about my side?
So how many exploration areas do they have? They have Kanyotaba.
So in area 3A, now government said to Talo, well, I can only allow you time to do the work plan I had approved you to do.
Yes.
So in area 1, I'll give you only the time you need to do the work plan that you are supposed to do.
Yes.
Within that timeline. So that's why for area 1, government gave Talo a license for only 1 year. Normally, exploration licenses in Uganda can go up to 8 years.
Yes.
But government allowed Talo only 1 year, non-renewable. And for Area 3A, there was only the Kanyataba prospect area that was scheduled to be drilled. So government said to Talo, instead of giving you the whole area of 3A, yes, I'm giving you only Kanyataba, which you are supposed to drill. You are not touching anything else. So that's why the license was given for Kanyataba for only 6 months.
6 months.
6 months. Government gave for Kanyataba 6 months, and for Area 1 only 1 year. So that's time. Now that way, government reinstated the time that the licensee had lost, and also to enable the farm down to take place farm down with these advantages, because we need, as government, as a country, we need more investors to come in. Total and Sinok, they are huge companies with capital, with expertise, with experience. So that enabled the transaction to take place, and also to enable Talo now to farm down, on which transaction also government will collect taxes. So that is the basis for the two PSAs that were signed. They were not new PSAs per se, but they were meant to reinstate the time. And also, to bring in the issue of Parliament, you indicated that Parliament had put a moratorium, but I think that moratorium was put on the new licenses. So those were not new
the
licenses,
old one that was pertaining.
and those negotiations were all going on. So no new licenses were signed on 3rd Feb.
All right. Gloria, I would like you to talk to us later about the pipeline and the plans for refining. But first of all, Mr. Bazira, the kind of explanation that is being given to us, how valid are they? You watch from the sides as CSOs.
And interestingly, I'm also learning it for the first time.
Yes.
Which means the public is not well informed about this information, which could explain the kind of confusion that the public has about even the way, and including the Parliament, the way even the licenses were, the production agreements were drawn. Because when you explain the way it is, you're explaining it now, it makes sense.
Right.
So I think you owe the Ugandan citizen an explanation to how this whole process was made. I just wanted to go to something you talked about, the local content thing, about the law. It says that there's going to be preferential preference to local entrepreneurs, local suppliers.
Yes.
But it also goes ahead and says only if they have the quality and the standard, they meet the quality and the standards of the international
or the
required standards by the whole company.
What's wrong with
Which means that actually we can perpetually fail to meet the standards, and that provision will never be operationalized.
What do you want to say?
Actually, it's fine. For me, it's fine. But I think we, as Ugandans, we need to work hard to make sure that we deliberately build the capacity of our local people to enter the industry. I mean, it's to talk about selling eggs or chicken,
yes,
or meat. We should be able, because usually these companies require.
Those ones we shall definitely. We don't need foreigners to sell eggs.
They require.
We do those ones we can do.
You see, so they need to go out and make deliberate attempt that the farmers actually meet the standards and make it. Once that is done, then they make it kind of conditional that the company buys locally here, without going to
buy
Nairobi,
to import cassava
from Nairobi, chicken from Nairobi,
and South Africa. Well, this is Spectrum Listeners on Radio 1. Tonight, the latest from the oil and gas sector. What are the new developments and how are they likely to affect the industry? We're going for a break. We'll be back.
Promotion kutoka MTN. Win 10 million shillings every day for 90 days. SMS win to 175.
Win, everybody. It is time to win lots of money. I told you how to do Sukun SMS. Big up MTN for this promotion.
Chino Chifufu.
Win 10 million shillings every day for 90 days. Simply SMS WIN to 175 to play and win. MTN Sukuma SMS.
Terms and conditions apply.
MTN. Everywhere you go. John, Mike and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also helped friends, seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He's just who he is. Special.
So here's to men like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Nile Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Nile Special. You've earned it.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90 is brought to you by Stanbic Bank.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. The latest from the oil and gas sector. What are the new developments and how are they likely to affect the industry? Our experts tonight, Mr. Alex Nyombi, Geophysicist at the Petroleum Exploration and Production Department in the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. Mr. Henry Bazira, Executive Director of the Water Governance Institute, also Chairman of the Civil Society Coalition on the Oil and Gas Sector. And Ms. Gloria Sebikari, Communications Officer at the Petroleum Exploration and Production Department in the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. You'll be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. Gloria, talk to us about the pipeline. Are we going to get a pipeline, and at what stage?
Edmond, government's policy, as stated in the National Oil and Gas Policy, is to refine the petroleum, the crude oil, within the country. So right now, the focus of government is the development of an in-country refinery that will be used to process the crude oil so that we can get various products such as petrol, diesel, kerosene, jet oil, and other products that are used, that can be used in petrochemical industries. So regarding this, government first undertook a feasibility study in 2010 to determine whether the refinery in Uganda was feasible. And this study was also based on an earlier study that had been done by the East African Community in 2008 to establish a refining strategy for the region. And that study recommended the development of a second refinery within the region because the demand for petroleum products is steadily increasing at a rate of about 7% per annum. So when government within the region. So when government undertook the feasibility study, one, it had positive results, saying it was a viable project for the country with a payback period of about 3 years.
For the refinery? For
the refinery, yes. Yeah. So after undertaking this feasibility study, it recommended the location, the size, the complexity, the configuration in terms of what products will come out of the refinery. So now what's happening is that the recommendations of this study are being implemented, starting with one, acquisition of land for the refinery. The land required is 29 square kilometers and for the refinery and attendant infrastructure. That's an attendant infrastructure because this land will have the refinery, it will have houses, accommodation, it will have some social services like Medicare, schools, and also it will have an airport, an airfield for that region because some of the equipment has to be flown into the country. So now that land, government is now, the ministry on behalf of government is now working with the Hoima District Land Board to survey that land.
The land has been
we applied to the Hoima District Land Board, who gave the ministry a go-ahead to survey the land and establish the boundaries for that land.
Evict the people.
No. And after establishing the boundaries, we will undertake what we call a resettlement action plan to document which people are within that land, how are they affected, if they're losing some property, if they're losing their livelihood, and how do they want to be compensated? Do they want to be given cash? Do they want to be resettled? So as I speak now, we have had various sensitization meetings with those affected villages in the different villages that are affected by this development. We had some in November, we were there in February, and we're even going back next week to continue dialogue with the communities and update them on what is going on. And even as that is going on, government also plans to hire the services of a transaction advisor because the recommendation was that this refinery should be established under PPP, a public-private partnership.
Yes.
So government is in the process of acquiring services of a transaction advisor to advise government on its participation in this development. And this question of the refinery also partly answers the critical question of when will commercial production start. When will we start seeing the first drop of refined oil? We'll talk about that
oil in a short while. First of all, talk to us a little bit more about this refinery. When can we expect it to be?
Yeah. Now, the recommendation from the study report was to have a modular refinery, starting with a refinery
that can be upgraded.
That can be upgraded from 20,000 barrels a day to 60,000, and then depending on the discovery, if there are more discoveries, further to 120 or 180,000 barrels of oil per day. So the timeline for establishing this refinery, as I informed you, work has already started for acquisition of land and procuring services of a transaction advisor. So we are looking at between 2 to 3 years to have the first small-scale refinery of 20,000 barrels per day.
So you can't expect to see a single drop of oil until 2015?
There is a plan for production, early production for crude that will be used to generate
heavy diesel fuels.
Yeah, heavy diesel used to generate power. You know, we've had challenges with the availability of power supply in the country. So one of the measures in the short term to fill this gap is using fast gas. One of the discoveries in Zizi is a gas discovery. So this gas will be used to fuel an integrated power project. Right. But this gas can only last for a period of 3 years. It can only work for a period of 3 years. So in order to lengthen the timeline, yes.
The stocks will have only 3 years.
Current discovered stocks are for 3 years. So to supplement on this, also crude oil can be used in the generation of power.
So the gas is not going to be flared?
No, it's not going to be flared, and that also answers something you mentioned in the beginning regarding the environment.
We'll talk about the environment a little bit later. I would like you to talk to us about the pipeline in detail. But first of all, Mr. Bazira, these people are going to be evicted. Do you have your hands on that, your fingers on that? They might be thrown out and left in the cold.
Actually, that is one of the concerns we are putting our eyes on. The issue of even how they are taking up the land, because by the time you start surveying the land, even deciding that we're going to take this land, people should have known. And it's good that Gloria is talking about some sensitization program that is taking place. The question is, these sensitizations, you see, you can have a sensitization that is one way,
yes,
where government is coming and just giving you instruction. But there's one sensitization where people are actually dialoguing. And even when it comes to issues of compensation and resettlement, that it is going to be a negotiated settlement. Not just because when I look at the law actually provides the minister with the powers to take the land when in public interest.
Yes.
And this petroleum industry is not one that can be classified as a public interest investment.
What do you mean by that?
A public interest investment is, for example, a road,
butterflies and
like a road.
Oil is not to you.
It's a private investment. It's not a
That's a controversial one.
Yeah, it's not a public investment, because public investments like a road, the minister will.
Oil is not a public investment.
It's not.
And doesn't benefit the public.
So with the law, the way it is currently, actually that's one of the contentions we have, is that it is giving the minister a lot of authority to take land, even when a landowner says, I don't want to give you my land.
Right.
So the minister can compulsorily take that land, because according to the law that we are seeing today,
right,
it gives him that power.
But you can have that amended through the procedure.
And that's one of the things that we are trying to negotiate, because the proposed Land Act actually, even the old one, allowed for a negotiated settlement.
Yes.
And that even when a landowner refused, and it was really, and that is always in public interest, then
they'll still try to talk to him nicely.
Yes, they'll still try to talk to him nicely and make sure that he even though the land is taken out from him, yes, there is some degree of compensation that is given to him that is satisfactory to that person.
All right, Alex, talk to us about this pipeline. What is the plan on that? Who's going to build it, and give us the details from which direction to which direction?
Thank you, Edmond. There is currently a study on pipeline. How we have decided to proceed as government is to proceed with a clear roadmap. So there is no step that has been taken without scientific evidence, without proper studies, and a clear way forward.
What do you mean? We can't consume all the oil. We need to export much of it, not just to the region, but even to the international market.
Well, government recognizes that, and what government says is that if we have a lot more oil than we anticipate right now, than the refinery can take on, then why not? We can export, but what through a pipeline? But what is our priority? The priority and the policy, according to the policy of 2008, the National Oil and Gas Policy recognizes adding value to oil within the country.
We've finished with the refinery. You've refined it, and we know we have more than we can consume in the country. And are we going to track it to Mombasa and other places?
Well, there are different development scenarios. For example, if the refinery produces the products, the finished products, and then we have to supply the region, we shall have to...
We'll cross that bridge later?
That's what I've talked about. There is a study on that, and the study is going to come up with clear direction and recommendations based on scientific data, because we don't want to speculate and guess.
Well, but there's been a lot of discussions about oil. Henry Oriam, the minister, was here some time back, and he spoke about a pipeline. So there must be a shadow plan for that.
If I could say something, Edmond, when you're talking about a pipeline, first of all, there's pipeline transportation from the fields to the refinery, and then transportation of refined products to the market.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that from the refinery.
So that study that Alex talked about, one study that is in the final stages is the one from the crude oil fields where it has been discovered to the refinery. I think that is the more critical study now. And then the second pipeline.
First of all, let's get that out of the way. Is there a big distance between the fields and the refinery?
Of course, there is a distance because it varies on where the discoveries have been made.
Different places.
Yeah, different places. But one of the bases for choosing the location of the refinery was also its proximity to where the discoveries have been made. So as I was saying, the second part of the study, which Alex was talking about, is the one that deals with transportation of refined products from the refinery to the markets. So that study is set to commence this year. And as you know, we have a sister department called the Petroleum Supplies Department, because marketing and distribution of products is what we call the downstream sector, and that sector is already well developed in Uganda.
Right, the filling stations, the depots, and
exactly,
and the other things. So the pipeline, we're not sure where it's going to pass. The one from the refinery to the market.
No, right now, because the study has not yet.
Has been an idea. You must have some.
Because the study hasn't yet been done, so it would be speculation.
You must have a zero draft. Is it going to go to Mombasa? Is it going to go to where is it going to go to?
Let's wait for the study.
I think what is interesting to note about the pipeline is that, yes, you're going to have pipelines that are feeding some central collecting point within the oil producing area. Those are pipelines that anybody will understand. But there's also a pipeline that is going to come from that central collecting point and to the market. These pipelines are obviously going to pass through people's land, because you know that there's no free land in this country.
Yes.
The land is owned by the citizens of Uganda.
Yes.
And so an interesting thing is that when you look at the laws that are being drafted, these are the group of people who are going to be affected by the pipeline, say from the refinery to they seem not to be reflected in this. How they're going to be dealt, because
they've raised the question.
Even the 29 square kilometers that you're talking about is really for the refinery. 29 square kilometers. It is really for the refinery and any ancillary infrastructure. It doesn't seem to capture the land take that will be taken by the pipeline, and how it will be dealt. What is envisaged on which areas, because those should be part and parcel of even the resettlement action plan that will be drawing for the 29 square kilometers.
I think what we should
hear from the listeners.
I think what we should know is we cannot attempt to rewrite every law that concerns this industry in these bills that have been tabled before Parliament.
Yes.
There is clearly land law in this country. There are other laws that govern all this. So I do not think that we need to rewrite how land is going to be dealt with in this upstream bill or in the midstream bill. There are other laws in this country which are prevailing, and those are the laws that government is following in implementing all these plans. So that is the clarification I wanted to make.
Alex, I want to disagree on the issue of the laws that we have today.
Yes.
All the laws that we have today are not in tandem with the current oil situation, because they were created at a situation when we never envisaged envisaged having oil in this country. And actually, these new bills that we are putting before Parliament, they demand that all the other attendant laws must be upscaled so that they are in line. For example, the environmental laws, the issues of land, they must be in tandem with the current law.
And then the question would be, should we amend the other laws to take care of this, or should we write environment issues, land issues
into one law,
employment issues into this bill? Really, is that the way to go?
All right, well, maybe we'll talk about that.
Actually,
let's hear from the listeners. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. You can call in now, 0414 348 111. 0312-260-390, 0312-261-390. When you call in, please tell us your name and where you are calling from. Spectrum, hello? Okay, Mr. Bazira, let's talk about that. Let's pursue that point a little bit further, Alex.
Actually, for me, what I want to see is to see that all these other laws are upgraded, amended, or improved to make sure that we're not saying that we collect everything and write it in the petroleum bill.
All right.
No.
Spectrum, hello? Hello? Yes, your name?
Isaac speaking.
Yes, Isaac.
I want to thank Alex for some of his explanations. I think he has shed some light which we didn't have. But then I need to ask, when the minister came and spoke about the pipeline from the refinery, what exactly was he referring to? Can those guys give us an idea, and they should stop dodging? Because if the minister mentioned it, maybe they discussed it in one of their meetings. Thank you very much.
Spectrum, hello?
Hello, good evening, sir.
Good evening, your name?
Aisha Kawada is my name.
Yes. Good.
I want to thank those guys for educating the public. The information they gave, I think, gave us a big insight. A lot of things we didn't know. But on the note you concluded, I don't want to think it is true that everything that will affect people around the place should be put in that same law. Matters that concern land should be in the land law. I imagine the compensation of people is really taken care of in the land law if government is going to take away somebody's land, catered for employment issues are catered for. Okay, of course, issues of employment in Uganda, other issues must be handled. But I wanted to thank them for the effort they made to explain to us. I want to request that they come more and more and more again. There are technical issues that are not very easy for lay people to conceptualize. Thank you very much.
Spectrum, hello? Okay, let's get back to the studio. Alex, you can't run away from it. Henry Okeloriam said there's going to be a pipeline. They spoke about heating. At that point, they were debating whether it's going to be an export of crude oil. There is a pipeline. Where is it going to pass?
Well, there are two issues we should separate here. Like Gloria said, are we talking about a pipeline to take crude oil, or are we talking about a pipeline to take finished products?
Whichever you have on
your pipeline that needs heating would be a pipeline for crude oil.
Yes.
Now, it would need heating because we have a waxy product.
No
yes.
problem.
So everyone knows that. So that is different. But that's where government has come in to say we are adding value to our product
in
the country.
The oil.
So we shall not, at the beginning, we shall not need that kind of pipeline, that kind of infrastructure.
So we shall need a pipeline that doesn't heat.
A pipeline that would come maybe would be, like Gloria said, a pipeline that needs to take finished products from the refinery, because the refinery is going to be.
Where is it going to pass?
The refinery is going to be in Kabale, in Hoima district, Kabale, Biseruka sub-county in Hoima district.
Yes.
Where the refinery is going to pass and all the details is what the study we are doing is going to decide. Because, like you see,
originally where was it going to pass?
We discovered in 2006 oil, but if in 2007, 2008 someone came and asked you where is the refinery going to be,
you won't know.
You wouldn't know, because the study was going on. The refinery study has just been completed. So even now we are undertaking the pipeline study. Everything will come out, every detail will come out. We don't want to speculate.
You don't want to jump the gun, Gloria.
Yes.
We can't have one law, according to Aisha.
Yes, I think what Aisha said is true, and Henry expressed the same, and so did Alex. So I think what the National Oil and Gas Policy recognizes other ministries, because we know this is a sector that touches on different sectors of the economy. So the roles and responsibilities of the different ministries are indicated in the policy, and we've started seeing these other government institutions coming on board. For instance, I can tell you, like the environment laws and regulations are being updated to take into consideration oil and gas issues and also other environmental concerns that have come up. Then I would also like to thank Aisha and Isaac for appreciating, and also want to inform listeners that we do have a website, and a lot of this information, technical information, updates on what is going on is put onto that website. The website is www.petroleum.go.ug.
Petroleum.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take another call. Spectrum, hello? Well, it seems we lost them. Talk to us, Gloria, about the environment. What waste management policy do you have?
You very well know that the Albertine Graben, where oil and gas has been discovered, is an environmentally sensitive area. And it has many national parks, it has protected areas. So that is why we do recognize this fact, and therefore, first of all, as these projects are taking place, number one, environment impact assessment studies are undertaken for each survey, for each well that is drilled. And I would like to say that in these assessments are done by Ugandans, by Ugandan farms. The environment is an area where we've seen Ugandans coming up. Then secondly, we do have a sensitivity atlas for the Albertine Graben. It recognizes the different sensitivities, where the water bodies, what species, what climate is in the area. It provides like baseline information concerning the environment. This sensitivity atlas, again, is a public document on our website, on NEMA's website, and it's a document that has two editions, and I think they're working on a third edition this year. So it keeps being updated as the years go by. Then a more long-term measure that's going to be undertaken this year is what we call a strategic environment assessment. It looks at these different sensitivities, and it feeds into the EIA processes.
The environmental impact assessment.
Yeah. Then regarding waste management, currently the waste being generated from the activities is being containerized at different sites.
How do they do it? They dig a pit and put plastic sheathing and then cover it?
Yes, when drilling is taking place, the pits are dug, and then they are lined with concrete and also plastic. Concrete and also plastic.
Yes.
Because these are best practice measures to ensure that the waste generated does not seep into the environment. Yeah. Okay. And then for a more long-term measure, waste management guidelines are being updated, and even we recognize that as we go further into development and production, more waste is going to be generated. So NEMA is working with other biodiversity institutions like Uganda Wildlife Authority, National Forestry, Fisheries Resources, to come up with a more long-term solution for waste management. And then also these biodiversity institutions that I've mentioned, together with the district local environment officers, they undertake monitoring. There's the high-level technical monitoring, then there's the operational monitoring, where NEMA and UA have dedicated officers that monitor the operations together with staff from the Petroleum Department.
Henry.
Yeah, I think for me the concern about the environment is that yes, they are all plans, and business is going forward. In terms of activities that are going forward, the damage on the environment is being done.
Or you saying the environment is being damaged?
Activities that are going on, there is damage going on. And for me, what I would like to see happening is that we need to put in place, first of all, streamline the way other ministries play with the industry, the Minister of Energy, for example, or the Minister of Petroleum, whatever case may be, because I'll give you a scenario. We don't seem to see how the disaster preparedness and management unit in the office of the Prime Minister would be involved in a case of a disaster. That doesn't seem to be coming out. We don't know how fast we can respond to a disaster. Is it 30 minutes? Is it 5 minutes? Is it 1 year? Is it 5 years? Is it 20 years? So we need a disaster management plan that is really clear, and even how the different institutions can be involved. I appreciate all the efforts that they're trying to do, but we are still a long way to really getting there to that point where we can say we are foolproof in this particular area.
What kind of environment abuse is going on right now? Talk to us about that.
Well, without empirical studies, it would be difficult to.
Well, but you made a strong allegation. But these are companies.
But one thing is clear. One thing is clear. Every point that you are drilling changes the land. Every point you are putting a road network changes the land. You are going to see people coming into the area. That is definitely going to change the environment.
The cultural environment.
Once the operations begin, they are going to have their own. And remember that even the law allows for flaring and venting.
It doesn't apply for. It doesn't allow flaring.
It does. It does.
No.
In the case of an emergency.
Of course, that is.
In case of an emergency, they don't allow flaring.
That case of emergency has not been described. It needs to be described. When is that flaring and venting allowed? So a prescription needs to be made.
I think the question for you was: what kind of environment damage is taking place? There isn't. You cannot point to any. What I can say is that for every single activity that takes place, there is an environmental impact assessment that takes place. So NEMA is there. Government is actually monitoring these activities 24 hours a day. There is always a government representative. The places that have been drilled have been restored. Journalists have been there. The public goes there. They have been restored. If you don't know the coordinates of those places, you can't actually locate them. So these places have been restored very well according to the environmental impact assessments undertaken. So government is monitoring this. No one can point to you which damage has been taken.
And there's not going to be any flaring.
The flaring, the law does not allow flaring at all. It says in case of an emergency. For example, would you have a platform, a facility blow up? If you have, for example, unexpected pressure build-up, you'd rather vent for 1 hour. And then even the law goes ahead to say, if you must vent in case of an emergency, you must present reasons why you vented. You present evidence to the minister, to government, why you vented. If you are found to have vented, without reason, the law says
there's a penalty.
There is a penalty.
Well, I think there's a strong point. There's a strong point there.
My point on that.
Flaring. In Nigeria, they fly. It causes it's even bad for the skyline.
My point is,
flames of fire.
But you see, you cannot have an emergency that lasts a year.
It won't.
You can't have an emergency for a month. You cannot flare for that.
All right. Gloria, let's talk about, as we wind up, let's talk about these scholarships. How does one get them?
My point, please.
Thank you, Edmond. Now, scholarships in different sections. First of all, there are scholarships that are offered to staff, government staff who have worked under public service for a number of time and therefore qualify to go out and study. And this is common in any government ministry that you go to, not only the oil and gas sector.
Their relatives might also want some scholarships.
If your daughter is staff, then you do not qualify.
Oh, I might have my daughter.
Then there are scholarships that are being offered by, let's say, donor agent countries like Norway,
the government
Netherlands, government scholarships, yeah.
How are they being managed?
Then, number two, there's government scholarships to study in public institutions. There's Uganda Petroleum Institute at Chigumba that offers certificate and diploma courses, and admission is through a government application through the Ministry of Education and Sports. Right. And then there's Makerere University that has a bachelor's degree and is also now planning for a master's degree in petroleum geosciences, and that application process is known through, I think, the joint admissions board.
Thank you very much, dear guests, tonight experts. Alex Nyombi, Geophysicist of the Petroleum Exploration and Production Department in the Ministry of Energy. Thank you for coming to Spectra. Mr. Henry Bazira, Executive Director of WGI, the Water Governance Institute, Chairman of the Civil Society Coalition of the Oil and Gas Sector, and Ms. Gloria Sebikari, Communications Officer in the Ministry of Energy, Petroleum Department. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond Kizito. Spectrum will be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English.